Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Women Are Worthy show on the Women Are Worthy Network channel. Whew, let me calm down because you guys know how I get when I have a phenomenal woman on the show. So I was, searching, doing my homework, and I came up with the title that's called "If Opportunity Doesn't Knock, You Got to Build a Door." And trust me, this phenomenal lady, not only did she build a door, she built a freaking house. This worthy woman is one of five daughters. And I want everyone to meet. She's running for the Secretary of State of Georgia Secretary of State. We want everyone to meet Miss. She's the representative B. Nguyen. I love that name, B. Nguyen. Now, before we get into it, let's talk about a phenomenal story. Her father worked as an orderly at a mental institution, and y'all, guess what? His salary was $3.35 an hour in 1981. Can you imagine? This man basically supported his family on that. B grew up in Augusta and she attended, yay, Georgia State. And she also started just to see how entrepreneurial she was and is and how she is about the community. She started a local nonprofit to educate and empower. Y'all know I love the word empower. Young girls. And I'm telling you, I'm digging this lady already, right? B made history when she was elected to Georgia State District 89, the seat that was formerly held by Stacey Abrams. So we're gonna give a warm welcome to this phenomenal, this entrepreneur, this women are worthy because she is worthy. Welcome, Miss Nguyen.
Thank you so much for having me on. And I love the woo for Georgia State. I'm a Panther and also really believe in the public education system and investing in that. So thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome. Your story is amazing. And it's so good to see. When I say she's down to earth, she is so cool. Yes, y'all, she's cool. She's one of those girls next door that you can ring her doorbell. I'm not advising y'all to do that now. Ring her doorbell and just say, you're so welcoming. And I'm so proud of what you're doing, what you've accomplished, and what you will be accomplishing. Tell us a little bit about yourself because you have, as we New Yorkers would say, chutzpah. Now you're going to be running for the Georgia Secretary of State. Where did you get this? I can do anything I want to do from? Where did you get this?
Everything kind of goes back to my family story, which I think a lot of us are rooted in our families and we draw from our lived experiences. And my parents were refugees that came from Vietnam. And I think as I'm watching everything that's unfolding in Afghanistan, I am reminded of their journey here to America, much like what we're seeing on TV when Saigon fell in 75. People were just scrambling for ways to get out of the country. And my parents were unable to get out immediately. So I had a portion of family that was airlifted out of the embassy in 75. But my dad was among the thousands of people who were swept up and placed in what they called re-education camp. And he was in prison for 3 years. And when he was released, my parents made a very difficult and courageous decision to flee their country. They left in the middle of the night on a small boat with, it was 30 family members total, including a cousin who was 10 months pregnant, had no idea how they were going to get out or where they were going to go. And they actually ended up being stranded in the middle of the ocean. And it was a Thai fisherman who found them and saved their lives and brought them to refugee camp in Thailand. And I'll tell that story because it was a stranger who stepped up in that moment, and he was instrumental in saving the lives of my parents and other family members. And we don't even know his name. I mean, they couldn't communicate with each other because my parents are Vietnamese and he was Thai. And so they had a language barrier, but he took them onto his fishing vessel and brought them to shore and to safety. And at the time, Georgia, we had a president by the name of Jimmy Carter, and Jimmy Carter said, I'm going to increase the number of refugees that we take into our country. And there was a Republican governor named Robert Ray in Iowa, and he said, Mr. President, I'll double the number of refugees in the state of Iowa if you are willing to take more people in. And so we see that bipartisanship under a Democratic president and a Republican governor who said, look, we're going to do this and help your family. That's how my entire family ended up in Iowa. And when I was born in 1981, my dad was a pharmacist in Vietnam and my mom was a social worker. What many people probably don't know is when you go to America, you lose your degrees. You have to start from scratch unless you're a doctor. You can take board exams. And so my dad went back to school. His first job in America was as an orderly at a mental institution. He doesn't talk about it very much, but occasionally he'll, make a comment or two about how it was just wild. He got thrown into the system where he was having to bear witness to mental health crisis in America. And so my parents really, really believed education was the key to getting out of poverty. And it was certainly true for us. It was a combination of political leaders who showed courage. It was the fact that we have safety nets in our country that helped my parents have a hand up. It was also their belief in making sure that we studied hard and made good grades. But primarily something that was very important to me was the fact that as I was growing up, I kind of watched my parents, right? And we were growing up in Augusta, Georgia. We moved to the South when I was young, like 7 years old. And they speak English, but with a really heavy accent. And I kind of watched them move through the world where I was like having to be their translator, where they would get nervous doing basic tasks that they were used to doing in their home country. And then where people would not treat them as a human because of their accent. Sometimes they would ignore them altogether or just be rude to them. And so I kind of watched all of that happening when I was younger and felt very helpless because they were the two people that I loved and respected the most. And I wanted to be able to save them from that situation. And I couldn't. I was a kid and didn't understand all the implications. So that's what led me to my work in public schools, because also as a kid, there were language barriers and cultural barriers that existed in my family. And I knew that my parents made this huge, courageous decision. And I always felt like I owed them, I owed becoming successful. I owed them taking a pathway that they wanted for me, which they wanted me to be a doctor, a lawyer, or engineer. But I didn't do any of those things because I understood that I wanted young women like me to feel empowered to be successful and make good decisions and like feel good about ourselves. Like that, I think that was one of the things is like that sense of empowerment that leads us to invest in ourselves. As a young kid, it's through, the decisions we make with our relationships and with our education and with a career path. And I think with my parents, they had escaped poverty, they had escaped war, but they didn't feel empowered. And that's what led me to that work in public schools that I did for 10 years.
Well, what I want to say, first of all, normally when you have someone who's a celebrity or someone in politics or local government, because I like to separate the two, or someone in business, we normally give them all kudos. I want to tell you, Ms. Nguyen, I'm going to give big props and shout out to your mom and dad. They did a great job because I've been following you and watching how you've been moving, and when you're so professional, but more importantly, you're all about family, and I love that. You're all about family. You always bring it back to family. Family is so important. But I just want to give the opportunity to tell you, or have the opportunity to tell you, thank God for your mom and thank God for your dad's persistence. And I want you to know that they did an amazing job, because we're so quick to give compliments to the person in front of us. But what about the family they're from? What about their parents? So I want to say thank you for that, to thank them for that. And I understand, because coming to this country and, again, and speaking or talking different and not being, well, I wasn't bullied, but people will make fun. And back then they called it teased you and things like that. So it makes you, and then coming from another country, Education is so important. It's drilled into you. Education, education, education. So I like the fact that you're giving back. And as a young child, because you loved your parents, you saw what they went through. You saw the disrespect that was given to them. And you now, in turn, want to make sure that within your power, that doesn't happen to other people. And I love that you're doing that. So, what led you from what you were doing to actually take on, the seat held formerly by Stacey Abrams?
Well, I was working in the classroom with kids, and I was there every week doing after school programming, mentorship, and life skills, because I also learned pretty quickly, right, that we have these metrics that we use in order to assess whether or not kids are successful. And one of the most common metrics is being able to graduate from high school and grade and going to college or having a career pathway. But when I spent time with these young women, they were telling me about what was happening at home and at school and in their communities. And I quickly learned that there was so much trauma, the trauma from poverty, but also a really high level of victimization in their household or in their communities. And I remember really, we were doing these partnerships with groups like Partnership Against Domestic Violence and teaching kids about what a healthy dating relationship looked like, because many of them were not in that. And I saw that they were pouring all of their energy into their dating relationships because they were looking to fill this hole. They wanted so badly to feel loved because they weren't getting enough. And it wasn't their parents' fault necessarily. You have working parents who are working multiple jobs to keep the lights on, or you have so many siblings that it is hard to get the full attention of your parents. Or in some cases, some of my kids' parents were deported. And so it's a lot of different issues and really hard to see. And I started thinking about how so many other kids in Georgia were in their exact same position, and that our hands were tied in a lot of ways. We could provide resources, mentorship, but one of the problems was the decisions that we're making at the state capitol, that decision to not fund public education adequately for people in public school systems. So here I am with kids who are attending schools that are underfunded. They have a lack of access to healthcare. They do not have access to affordable housing. Displacement was very common. They didn't have access to healthy foods, to dental care, to public transit, and then that high level of victimization. On top of that, for those who face immigration issues, they were just facing a system that is very hard to beat. And so I understood that we have to change the representation that we have at the state capitol, because those are the people who make the policies that trickle down to everyday Georgians. And so it was because of, my love for my students that I was compelled to run. And it was because of my love for my family that I decided to run, and recognizing that we have to dismantle the actual policy decisions in order for us to effectuate change in the way in which we want to see it.
Now you go, okay, after this conversation, you get a phone call. It's President Biden, and he says, hey, we have a $10 million check right here. Do what you need to do with it. My question to you is, what are the 3 things where would you apply that money to?
Oh, that's a hard question, because, there's just so much income inequality here in Georgia and in Atlanta. And I think you probably know this, but Atlanta, I think, is one of the top cities where if you are born poor, then you are likely to stay poor. And so, I would want to invest in stabilizing communities, because one thing that I think that we forget is, yes, we have to ensure that we're adequately educating our children, but we also have to stabilize their families economically, because they need the involvement of their parents. And when parents have to juggle those multiple jobs, and when parents are financially stressed, it is really hard to have it's really hard to have an emotionally stable household. And so I would want to be able to help our communities that struggle with having livable wages, with staying in their homes because of rising rents or rising property taxes. So I think that, finding ways to equip people so that they are able to find economic security, because that intersects with their ability to make sure that they're involved in their children's lives and education. You can't tackle one thing solely. You have to be able to recognize that they intersect with each other.
You're running for Secretary of State, and I think you have to be under a rock to know who you are. But for those who don't know, my question to you is, what platform are you running on, and why do you want to run for Secretary of State?
I think that I'm not the type of person who had like a life plan, right?
Yeah.
When I was growing up, I was not somebody who felt like I had innate talents that said, man, like my sister, she's a really good artist. And it was like, she had to be one, right? There was just no other choice. She's just so talented. So she knew she was going to do something that would enable her to utilize those skills. I'm a good writer, but I didn't really feel like I had some innate calling, and it took me a long time to kind of figure out my career path and what I wanted to do. And so, I shared with you, I had started this nonprofit. I was working in public schools, and then I decided to run for office. And being a part of the minority party at the legislature is extremely challenging. And I did not have plans to run for statewide office. It wasn't until last year when we suddenly turned elections into a partisan issue, where I found myself on the forefront of defending our democracy and defending the results of the election. And I was in this committee hearing facing off with Trump's legal team and Rudy Giuliani. And ahead of time, people were like, maybe you should not speak up because we're worried about you because you're a woman and you're a woman of color and they're going to put a target on your back. But I knew that I didn't run for office to stay silent. And I also understood this was much bigger, right? It wasn't about me. It wasn't even just about Georgia. It was about our entire country. So I did my homework, and I was able to take down Trump's legal expert in committee. And immediately my name was doxxed, or my address was doxxed on a right-wing gun site. And I started receiving a bunch of, really racially and I was going to say racially charged, but racist and xenophobic harassment, but on top of that, threats. And I had to make a safety plan. And I was like, how do we get to this space where I am using truth and facts, and suddenly I'm making a safety plan, and I'm having to call APD and DeKalb and Georgia State Patrol, and they're doing a threat assessment. And it wasn't just me. It was elected officials across our country. It was also election workers who are there to do a job under really stressful circumstances during a pandemic, and their lives are being threatened. And I thought, how in the world did we get to this place? And after January 6th happened, I thought to myself, I really, really hope my Republican colleagues, just reflect internally on what is happening, because I don't think any of us anticipated January 6th was going to happen.
Right.
I think many of us were very horrified on both sides of the aisle. And I know I had conversations with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and behind closed doors, they will say, no, I don't think the election was stolen. And some of them were very public about condemning the attacks on our state capitol on January 6th. But instead, we went back into legislative session, and the whole entire time, they were focused on passing a bill to make it harder for Georgians to vote. They did not discuss expanding Medicaid to give 500,000 Georgians access to healthcare during a pandemic. They did not put more money towards the Department of Labor to ensure that when people are calling for their unemployment, they can get somebody on the other line. And they did nothing to think about how we were going to increase our vaccination rates or our rollouts. And instead, this bill was their main focus, passing a bill to make it harder for Georgians to vote. And it was shortly after we got out of legislative session that I sat down and I thought, what is it that I am going to do next? What is it that I need to do next? And I felt like it was the extension of work that I've already been doing, because it wasn't just this committee hearing on Rudy Giuliani. It was, the past 4 years sitting through committees and pushing back on their attempts to roll back the right to vote. They did try to attempt to eliminate Sunday voting a couple years back, and doing hundreds of hours of voter protection to make sure people know how to make their votes count, and also organizing for Stacey Abrams, organizing for Biden, Raphael Warnock, and Ossoff. And so it felt like an extension of the work that I've already been doing.
What would you say is your greatest strength?
So as it pertains to being a human or a candidate?
Both. Yes.
I think one of my greatest strengths is the drive to do things for the right reason. And I think that when you do things for the right reason, you are able to stay grounded in your values and in your morals. And for me, because the work that I've chosen to do in my life, the work in public schools, running for state leg, and now running for this, is an extension of, my desire to honor the legacy of my parents, an extension of the desire to do good for the students whom I worked with over the last 10 years, and the desire to fight back against these laws that made it hard for people like my 70-year-old neighbor to have his vote counted in the general election. And so it always goes back to, your truth, like what your truth is. And if you stay rooted in that, if you're doing things for the right reason, then I believe that no matter what the outcome is, you can go to bed at night and feel like, you're doing your best to leave the world a better place.
What would you tell that wonderful young lady by the name of B? If you could go back, 7-year-old B, what would you say to her?
When I was 7, I was a painfully shy child. I was very timid, very scared. And I struggled a lot with finding my voice. And throughout my life, I was seeking the validation that I couldn't give myself externally. Mm-hmm. So what I would tell myself and other young women and women in general is to really take that time to learn how to love yourself and cultivate a good relationship with yourself. And that was kind of, a lot of the work that I did in public schools was around self-esteem and self-worth, because it doesn't matter how good your grades are if you don't feel good about yourself, right? Like that will certainly help you in some manner. But, I felt like one of the reasons that students drop out or they engage in high risk behavior. Well, this is actually a statistic. It's right. 75% of girls with low self-esteem engage in at-risk behavior, which is dropping out of school, drug use, sexual activity early on, things like that, right? There are all these indicators. And in order to increase that graduation rate, to prevent young people from dropping out of school, to prevent them from engaging in at-risk behavior, it centers around their self-esteem and their self-worth. And if you believe in yourself, then you're less likely to take the pathways that are harmful for you. And so I think the importance of building self-worth and building self-esteem for young people, it's actually kind of overlooked in a lot of ways, but critically important to their success as young people and as adults.
You know, talking to you while you were talking, I was like, she's speaking my language. We're speaking the same language. I feel like I'm talking to myself when you said that. I'm like, oh my God, you know, like the heavens just opened up, because that's how I feel. Because I was first empowering and mentoring older women, but then I realized, wait a minute, Jackie, let's go back to the younger girls, because it's going to be much harder when you're older, because you know, when you have this and you've been this way for such a long time, it's harder to learn new tricks. So I then said, let me focus on the younger generation, the younger girls, because you're right. When you have self-love, self-esteem, self-worth, it's harder for you to go down that path, because you have that I'm a conqueror, I can do anything that I set my mind to. And I have this thing that I say that in order to join our tribe, you must subscribe. I basically tell my young ladies, find a tribe. Let's create a tribe, because you need to make sure that you have people supporting you, because you can't go into this world or go on in this world by yourself. You need to have a tribe of positive thinkers, thought provokers, people who are going to call you on your stuff. You know, you don't need yes people. You need people who have good intentions around you. And it seems to be, and it's, well, not seems to be, it's working, you know, in the areas that I'm going. So I have like kids from Clayton State and things like that, just helping them, letting them know that you matter, you are invincible, you know, and also it's okay to say no.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay not to be, and because we're women, you know, people think that we're super women, and it's usually the ones who go, go, go. You're pouring into a lot of people. People are not pouring into you. And this leads into my next question. What do you do for downtime? What do you do for me time? Taking time for yourself, which is so important. What do you do?
I like that you're bringing up that saying no is important, right? Because women do feel like we have to be responsible for everything. And then part of it, I think, is like this desire to please people and not disappoint people, right? And that we are not taught that boundaries are extremely healthy and boundaries are very important. And so, you know, it's also something that we have to learn, because we're taught to be everything to everyone and taught to be people pleasers. So I like that you brought up, yes, you have to learn how to say no, right? And that boundary message, I think, translates into relationships too. Relationships that have boundaries are important. And so, you know, I forgot your question.
What do you do for self-care?
Oh, what do I do for self-care?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one thing that is very important for me is to go set aside some time a couple days a week to go running. So running became an outlet for me many years ago. I was going through a really hard time, and I was like, well, I'll go on a run. And then I started running more and more and more. And for almost 10 years, I didn't quite make it to 10 years. I wanted to really badly. I ran the Publix half marathon and Thanksgiving half marathon every single year. But then when I got involved with politics and campaigns, I completely fell off the wagon of running. And my first legislative session, I didn't run the entire legislative session. And so I had to really be like, I have to invest in myself. It's the one nice thing that I do for myself almost on a daily basis. It's the one time that I have during my day in which I do not have my cell phone. And so I do that. I think that's important. So I have 4 sisters. 3 of them live in Atlanta. So making sure I spend time with them and my 2 little nephews. And then, I am having to learn how to say no to things and trying as much as I can to not feel guilty about it. I also like to cook and read. And, like I'm on this Zoom call with you now, but I'm wearing sweatpants, which are very comforting to me.
It does something to you. And see, for me, it's important because I'm over when I'm, speaking, because I do public speaking and I talk to women, I talk to them about, or I address self-care. That is so important. And I was raised with men, majority men, and guys have no problem saying no. So I learned early on to say no. I had my issues, came back home and came back into the fold. I know when to say no. I am not a people pleaser, and I love me. I love me before I love you. And I mentioned earlier, I'm married, but I come first. It's all about me, not selfishly. And
Yep.
sometimes when we do things, and I'm trying to change women's vocabulary, because somehow when they have children or a significant other, they pour so much into these people, the children and their significant other, they forget about themselves. And it's okay to think you should come first, because in my household was me, it was God, myself, my husband, my child, and then of course my animals, my fur babies. But we have to make time to, whether it's meditation, whether it's, and I'm not talking about getting your nails done, and that's okay if that's what people choose to do, but go out in nature and walk. This pandemic has been a blessing and a curse. The pandemic has taught me to just slow down, because I'm a Capricorn and I'm a type A personality, and I'm running, 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 running. And I check the box and I check the box, and I'll stay until 3 o'clock in the morning. The pandemic came, slow down, partner. Slow down. People are dying. This is the time for me to pick up the phone, call a person I knew in the third grade, and hunt them down and say, hey, how you doing? Telling people I love them. On social media, people are saying, you say you love me, and you don't even know me. You're a spirit. And the fact that you're a spirit, I love the spirit. I may not, you may do horrible things, and I may not love that spirit, but you are here for a reason. So I'm all about pushing positivity, because I'm telling you, I'm allergic to negativity. I break out in hives. I can't deal with the gossip. I can't deal with that. If you're not here to pour into my life, you got to go. You got to go. So I just love what you're doing. I love who you are. I love what you're doing. Again, because your story, this is a book right here. This is a movie. Okay. And I hope you're going to be writing a book, but maybe you're a little too young right now, because I see so much, that you're going to be doing. So for those, what's your platform that you're running on? I'd like to know that. And how can we, if there's someone out there, they want to donate, they want to get involved because they want to see you in office, where can we tell them to get in touch with you and your platform? Because I'm posting that, honey. I'm going to be posting all of this stuff. I'm kind of digging you. Yes.
Well, I think also to your point, like if you are not taking care of yourself first, it is very hard to take care of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, I think so for the Secretary of State's race, the most important thing is protecting our democracy and fighting back against what we're seeing, which is not just voter suppression, but the subversion of democracy. And I think that the Secretary of State's race is going to be one of the most important races that we vote on next year in Georgia. The Secretary of State is a person responsible for certifying elections, and we cannot elect somebody who chooses not to honor the results of the election if they don't like the person who won, which is where the Republican Party is headed. And so, part of what I want to talk about, and that I do talk about when I talk to voters, is look, the Secretary of State's office is one office that can help safeguard our democracy, but it is not the fix to safeguarding our democracy. We have to pass federal voting rights, and we have to change the legislative makeup of our Capitol, and we have to elect people who support voter expansion at every level of government. And so when I talk to voters, what I tell them is, look, when I look at this office, I want to be very realistic. What can the Secretary of State do with Senate Bill 202 in place, which diluted some of the authority of the Secretary of State's office? And what can the Secretary of State do if there's a Republican-controlled legislature? So there are going to be restrictions around the ability to move forward agendas that would require the legislative body to pass it. So while I support being able to register to vote on the same day of the election, I support having a central voting center for every county. I support accepting ballots that are postmarked by election day and received within 72 hours, just like we do military overseas ballots. I support ending our use it or lose it policy that purges people who choose to sit out on elections. Those are all things that I think are important. But what can the Secretary of State do given the political climate currently? So one is work with all 159 counties and their local election boards to ensure that they have the adequate resources and training to carry out local elections efficiently in every single county. Our current Secretary of State is throwing Fulton County under the bus and saying that the state should take over Fulton County Election Board. And that is a partisan power grab. I have not seen any evidence that he has come to the table as a leader and said, what is it that we need to do in order for you to improve your election process? The Secretary of State needs to be a partner in that for all 159 counties. There needs to be increased training across all 159 counties, and the Secretary of State needs to be the person to allocate adequate and equitable funding to all 159 counties. So that is one major thing that the Secretary of State's office can do. Second, we are currently undergoing voter purges, and under federal law, we do have to clean up the voter rolls. So it makes sense. If somebody passed away, you remove them. If somebody moved away from the state of Georgia, we remove them. Here's what's different about Georgia. We also remove those voters who have chosen to sit out on 2 general election cycles. They're put into a process to be purged off the voter rolls. So currently 185,000 Georgians are under this category, and they receive a letter in the mail. And if they don't respond to that postcard, they are put in a process to be removed. Under Secretary of State Raffensperger and Kemp, they have used that to remove voters, mostly voters of color, in a bad faith manner. If the Secretary of State was truly interested in contacting voters and acting in good faith, they should be using everything at their disposal to notify voters. That means using the phone numbers on file for calling and texting. That means using email addresses for notification. And that means doing more than sending a letter in the mail that somebody might think is junk mail and throw it out. Mm-hmm. And so keep being able to act in good faith to increase communications to voters and trying to keep eligible voters on the roll. That is something you can do without legislative change. The last thing I'll talk about is we are a really diverse state. And Jackie, you and I talked about how the census numbers just came out, how Kennesaw has changed, how we are a state that is multiracial, multi-ethnic, and diversity and inclusion. That is something that makes me very proud to be a Georgian. So when we think about meeting voters where they are, one of the things that would be important is making sure that we provide language translation. As somebody who lived in a household where my parents didn't speak English as their primary language, it's just simply an investment in the people that live in our state. So when we have a portal where a voter can go on and request an absentee ballot application, that is in English only. If we simply invested the resources to translate to the top spoken languages in the state of Georgia, that is increasing access to voters. And we can use that and apply it to other divisions like corporation, because that is an investment in workforce, knowing that we have so many people who own small businesses. And so thinking through like our opportunities with that Secretary of State's division, I think we have a tremendous opportunity both on voter protection, but also on workforce, on consumer protection. And so those are some of the things that are important to me.
Where, if someone's on here and they want to, man, I'm digging this chick. Jackie's been talking about her and I'm really digging her. I want to put time, talent, and efforts towards this. How can they contact your office if they want to volunteer or donate?
So you could go to www.beeforgeorgia.com, and it's all spelled out, BEEFOR, and then Georgia.com. My favorite social media platform is Twitter, and that is at beeforgeorgia.com. It's at beeforgeorgia, no .com, at beeforgeorgia, spelled all the way out. And then it's also Be for Georgia on Facebook. And I am being told that, Jackie, I need to create a TikTok. So eventually I'm going to have to do that.
Yes, definitely do a TikTok. Because we want, just talking to you again, like I said, it's just, it feels so good. I feel like I'm home just talking to you, and it's, I just want people to listen to your message, and I'm just definitely going to spend time marketing this and getting this out there. I want people to listen to your message because you're not a politician. I don't know if I'm sure you have been told, you're not a politician. You're a person that cares about the community, care about the state that you live in. You want to better those around you, not just yourself. And that's the message that I like, because I was so glad. I'm like, oh my God, I've been waiting to see if you were sending a popo on me, because when I said I've stalked you, I have stalked your social media, everything. And I'm liking what I'm hearing, because I don't just look at Republican, Democrat, I look at the person. And I love your message. You are the epitome of a worthy woman. You are phenomenal at what you do, and I wish you well. So, in closing, one of my questions I'd like to ask is, why should women support each other?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's so critical to support other women, right? I mean, I'm one of 5 girls, and I think that there is something really powerful about building sisterhood. And without my 4 sisters, I would not be where I am now. And I just love and cherish women and girls. And, I think that when we support each other, we then build a movement for every single woman and girl to be able to take a step closer to achieving their dreams and their aspirations. And oftentimes, sometimes we get put in situations where women and girls feel like we should compete against each other, but there is room for all of us. I mean, I really believe there's room for all of us. And when we elevate more women and girls, it is better for everybody. And so I am a huge believer of women supporting women, and girls supporting girls. It's actually one of the things that I try to impart with the young women that I worked with, the importance of supporting each other and uplifting each other, because we need each other. And when we are able to give each other that support, not only do we support and elevate our fellow sister, but it helps us too, And so I think there's just a real beauty about women supporting women.
Whenever I hear a woman talk about she doesn't like women, I run. I go to the next one. I'm trying to be more patient to listen, because maybe it's some sort of hurt. There's something that has gone on and you want to see if you can help them. But if you see you can't help, I run the other side, because I so believe in, if you help a woman, you're helping a nation. That's what you're doing, because the bloodline, and we have to change the narrative that women are crabs in a barrel. I tell my mentees, I don't have to be in the same, if you're in the front of the room, I don't have to be in the front of the room with you. But as long as I'm clapping and cheering you on, that's all that matters, because no pun intended, if you win, I win. Okay, that's what people need to know. So I am supportive of my women, my tribe, and if you're all about positivity, that's how I feel, because I need to make sure I show support to other women, to show them that I love them. I need to support you. What do you need? But if I'm pouring into you, you have to pour back into me, or find someone else because I'm not going to be tapped out. I've been there so much that in the past where my bank account was bouncing, it was bouncing because I had you have to deposit into my bank account. Yeah. And I don't need money. You know where I'm going with this. Yeah. I just need any kind of deposit, or pour water into me, because just like we have the sun, we also need the rain. We also need the storms because we have to grow. So I want people feeding into me. And when you build me up, I can build someone else up, and on and on and on. I have this thing that I teach my mentees that whenever you're out, I need you to give compliments to 3 women. You don't need to know them. I need you just to walk up to them and say, hey, you're beautiful. Oh my God, your teeth is gorgeous, or your hair. Oh, I'm loving your outfit. Where did you get it? Something like that, because you don't know if that's the only compliment that this woman is going to receive. And it can turn her frown upside down. So I make every mentee that I have to get a passport. That's important to me, that they travel, and always give compliments. You don't have to know anyone. I want you to just go up to a random person, and they're coming back to me and telling me, oh my God, Miss Jackie, and they have to give me progress reports in the beginning when they're first starting with me, at least for 3 months. Give me progress report. What happened? And they're seeing how welcoming, because when you're giving a woman a compliment, her shoulders may be like this, and then all of a sudden it just goes down and she's relaxed. You see, so I'm all about good vibes, affirmation, vision board. That would be me. Okay. Good karma. So
I love that. I love it.
That's what I do. We do that, and you have to do it. And when we have young boys, we tell them to do the same thing and how to phrase it, because it's the opposite sex. But we need to feed more into our women, because we're working, we're taking care of our family, we're taking care of, and not just a significant other. And sometimes you're working at a job that you completely hate. That's another story. That's another show. But you have to prepare your family. So we want to change that mindset, reframe. But it's all about giving compliments. People change when you give them heartfelt compliments. Your purse, your clothes, your shoes, and I tell them to say it with an attitude like, man, that shoes you're wearing, or look at your smile, it's beautiful, and just make them laugh when you're giving the compliment, not just say, oh, you're beautiful. No, just say, baby, Miss Lady, something like that. And it has worked for me, and I just love doing that and seeing a smile on people's face. So we want to thank you for first of all, we know that you're extremely busy, extremely. We want to thank you for just taking the time to be in our space, to share your journey with us. And I want to share your journey with everyone that I know that's in Georgia. Okay, so guys, I'm going to be lighting up my social media with this one. So we thank you. And if there's anything that we can do, just please please let us know, because we're here to support women who are doing positive things. So again, we want to thank everyone for tuning into the Women Are Worthy Network, the Women Are Worthy Show. If you want to join our tribe, you must subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Women Are Worthy Network. And again, we had a wonderful conversation with B. Nguyen. She is running for Georgia's Secretary of State. Let me say it a little louder. Georgia Secretary of State. Okay, so go on and just go on her website. If you want to volunteer, we're gonna need volunteers. We're gonna need some money now. We're gonna need some cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. So make sure you volunteer and just do whatever her office asks of you. So again, thank you. We want you to have a terrific Tuesday, wonderful Wednesday, turnaround Thursday, fabulous Friday, satisfying Sunday, self-care Saturday, and satisfying Sunday. So, girl, I got all these things for these days. So bye, everyone. Have a great day.